I honestly think that that's something that a lot of people aren't talking about when it comes to live streaming right now, is how to make offers in ways that are really,
not marketing,
not gross,
not
like
salesy.
not salesy, not gross. I mean, a lot of the focus I've heard on is,
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast, brought to you by Entrepreneur.io.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Creative Juice. My name is Corrin Campbell, your co-host, and with me, as always, is my other co-host, Jack McCarthy. How you doing today, Jack?
Hello. Doing good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm excited about today's episode because I am sick of hearing about live streaming. How about you?
Live streaming has become the new buzzword in our new normal. So, yes, I am also sick of hearing about live streaming.
It's exhausting.
So what are we going to be talking about today?
Today we're talking about live streaming. I think we wanted to come onto the podcast and kind of say some things that we think aren't already being said about live streaming, right? If you follow your favorite artist on Bands in Town, you're probably getting a crap ton of emails that are like, oh, Death Cab for Cutie is doing a live stream. Oh, Josie Dunn is doing a live stream. Oh, Lady Gaga is doing a live stream, and it's just like, dude, this is exhausting. Although I should say, if you are doing live streaming, you should put it as a show in Bands in Town. Because it'll email me about it. But I think that there is just a huge amount of saturation in the live streaming department, obviously because tours have been canceled, artists aren't going anywhere. Everybody's talking about it. If you're on Twitter, it's like, can we talk about something else? And I think there are some really key points missing from the conversation about live streaming. So we wanted to come on today and kind of touch on some of those things so that you could get a podcast episode about live streaming that was not just another podcast about live streaming.
Yeah, I think that pretty much sums up the climate of the live streaming topic right now. There's a lot of people kind of just out there saying the same things, and we've certainly had plenty of podcast episodes where we've talked about live streaming in the past, and we've certainly been encouraging indies to be live streaming for, quite some time now.
Right,
so hopefully in this episode we can unpack some things that we're kind of seeing at the ground level happening right now, and how people are using live streaming in unique ways, how you can tie it into more of your personal brand as an artist, and just give you some food for thought and a different perspective than what you hear the masses talking about right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're an Indie Pro member, Circa just did a ground report about live streaming last week. So highly recommend that if you've not checked out your ground report section, you go check that out. He's talking about cameras and some other not typical conversations about live streaming, right? So we're trying to change up some of the conversation at least, but also if you aren't currently an Indie Pro member, highly recommend you go do that. That's at Entrepreneur.io. You can request an invite, and as soon as we make sure that you're not a bot or a jerk, you can go ahead and sign up. So, only cool indies in our, only nice, kind, giving, helpful indies asked to apply. So let's talk about live streaming. And I know, we've had Dave Pettigrew on our podcast before, and we've talked about him every 3 episodes, but he has been...
Shout out to Dave.
Shout out Dave. He's obviously one of our front runners. He's been an IndieX client for, a couple of years now. He's definitely one of our longest term IndieX clients. And he's done a lot of cool stuff with live streaming. We have a couple other artists, both at the agency level and the ones we're snooping on in the Indie Pro group, who are doing some cool live stream stuff. So I think the biggest thing here is if you've got one album out, you got 9 songs or something like that. What do you do on your live streams, right? What are you doing that's not just you can't do that every week, right? So we're here today to bring you some cool ideas, and I know that Jack has seen a lot of them firsthand. So Jack, I'm going to let you kick it off because I think you've got a lot to contribute to this conversation.
Yeah, for sure. So, and that's one of the big questions that we get in our community and that I talk with IndieX clients about is, what do I live stream about? How do I take it beyond just music? Especially like Corrin said, if you're an artist that's maybe just getting your legs and you've got a record out, and maybe you've done some live streams where you've played some tunes from that and you've done some covers, but you're kind of in a place where it's starting to feel old hat if you're doing live streams, especially if you're just getting into the swing of it now in light of not being able to actually be out gigging and playing shows. The content of your live streams might be, the well for that might be, kind of running dry. So in this episode, we kind of wanted to unpack just how to, think outside the box for your live streams and things that you can be doing a little bit differently, just to keep it fresh and keep your fans engaged. So I wanted to kind of kick off with that disclaimer because, this is something that we've talked about in plenty of other episodes, and even in last week's episode we talked a lot about the artist plight of advertising and how connecting deeper than just your music is something really important to be able to do in order to position yourself as unique and not coming off as super salesy. And this is especially true when it comes to your live streaming efforts. What ways can you bake in your personality and make something that stands out? Because right now, live streaming is really, really saturated, right? It's so, every artist and their mother is live streaming and playing songs right now. So it's pretty critical, I think, in order to stand out from the noise, to do something that's unique, to do something that really puts you in front of people in a different way that, sets you apart from their other favorite artists that they might want to listen to.
Right. Well, and two, this is like an excellent place where if you, took some action from last week's episode and you did some investigation into, your narratives, your storylines, your hobbies, your talking points, your topic wheel, right? Whatever you want to file it under, this is a great opportunity to be, brainstorming further, either the things that you found that you feel like you could integrate into it, or thinking about things that you would like to do on your live stream and then building a narrative around that, right? You can work it both ways. So that among many other things. I literally just got an email from bands in town saying that Josie Dunn is going to be live. I'm swear to God, guys, it's rampant. So Jack, kick us off with some cool things to get this moving.
For sure. So like Corrin mentioned, Dave Pettigrew is one of our longtime indies. He's a longtime IndieX client, and he has kind of been a really model blueprint of an artist who's really been killing it with live streams for years now. And as a Christian worship artist, much of his live streaming is focused around the interest that his fans have in doing worship together, and they hang out together, once a week. But since recent events kind of picked up with the coronavirus pandemic, he's picked up the pace with his live streams and actually begun to do them more often throughout the week. I think he's doing them 3 to 4 times a week. Yeah, it's crazy. But what's really cool about it, and this is kind of the actionable talking point here, is how he's taking those live streams and kind of making each of them a little bit more unique. So he's not doing the same thing for each and every one of them. So for example, if you're an artist that's wondering, like, I want to ramp it up and maybe I want to, do more than just a music live stream on a Monday night. Maybe I want to do something on a Wednesday. You could, start theming your live streams almost in the same way that you might, theme your email marketing, and have specific types of campaigns that go out. You could do the same sort of thing with your live streams. So you might have a shorter live stream, maybe a separate kind of live stream segment that's just based on like a Q&A, and you could only accept questions from your fans via email. So it kind of works hand in hand as a bribe to get people to opt into your list. That's just kind of one example of, where you could start to expand into different kinds of segments that are spread out throughout the week if you're trying to be consistent with your live streaming.
Right. Yeah, that's a lot. I've never live streamed that often in my entire career. So
yeah, it's actually really cool the way that Dave started doing that. Just to shed some insight from the ground level here for you guys is the first. He had a leg of a tour cancel at the beginning of March when the coronavirus pandemic really took off here in the U.S. and kind of started shutting things down. He had a leg of a tour get canceled. So what he decided to do was he pivoted all of those dates that he would have been playing and just decided to do a live stream tour. He called it the live stream tour with his fans. And his fans loved it because there were so many people that were planning on coming out to those shows that those nights were already taken up for them and they were looking forward to it. So rather than just kind of leaving them hanging with like you'll get a refund or, the shows will be rescheduled, he jumped ahead and said like, well, I'm going to make sure that my fans are taken care of. This is really nurturing in action, if you ask me.
Yeah.
To jump ahead and be like, I want to make sure that I delivered on the promise that I made to my fans to give them a great night. And he did. And that was really how the consistency started. And then upon seeing the success of that over that first long weekend, he just continued with the momentum. So it was really, really an awesome example.
Yeah. It's also really cool that he's able to have the demand to stream that many times per week, right? Which, that comes from the fact that he's been live streaming consistently at least once a week, unless he was like deathly ill. He's been doing that for how long? A couple of years, right?
Yeah, I think he's been doing it for 2 years, if not more.
Yeah, and it's not like he started with hundreds of people on his first stream, right? Like he worked it up and he, did that recurring content. He was consistently coming live at the same time. He experimented with a couple additional dates, right? I think he was trying like Wednesdays for a little while. And so, the fact that he's got that demand is purely because he built that audience up, who is like ready to hang out with him every time. So that's really rad. There obviously is a certain component to that, right? When you're talking about a Christian worship artist, right? Especially, people who participate in that probably do it more than once a week, because God is every day for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but I do think that there are other things that, if that isn't necessarily your niche, you can do. I think one thing that's been really cool to watch is our support specialist, who is kind of moving into some community things as well, Gracie. She has a really cool artistry, and something that she does is she will actually poll her fans and have them and ask questions on IG and stuff like that to actually populate cover requests. And she'll have like Beatles night, because she knows most of the catalog of the Beatles. And so she will, she'll go ahead and move forward on that and play the covers that people request. And I'm sure she's like screening some of them, like, oh, I know this one, so therefore I'm confident that I can, play it. But, as much as we say that covers are like not recommended for a lot of fan finders, and things like that, that doesn't mean that it's not great for live stream, and so same thing too. If you were, like we were talking about last week, if you're running like a kind of like a rewards program, right? Having people vote in those, and if they select one of the songs that you play, like, rewarding them for that. So there's a lot of cool things you can do by utilizing covers.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's such a good point, especially like making theme nights out of your cover set, so to speak, if you decide to take that kind of angle. I think that can be really, really interactive with your fans and also give you some insight into where your musical interests and influences overlap with what your fans dig.
Right. And it wouldn't have to be like a certain artist, right? Like, Gracie did Beatles, but it could be like songs to cry to, Netflix and chill night. You know what I mean? Like there's so many different themes that you could come up with to really make it available to everybody who's a fan, no matter what other genres they like.
Yeah, I think there's a really interesting corollary here. And this is kind of a big thing that's sort of taken over in like actual live shows recently within the last couple years. And I'm sure it's popular down there in Nashville too, or like the emo nights, the themed emo nights.
I've actually seen those like in LA, in Denver, in Nashville. I've actually seen those all over the place.
Yeah, they're all over the place and they're super popular. So taking some inspiration from, that sort of setup and applying that same creativity to your live streams could be something really, really neat to do, just to make something that's a little bit more than just like, oh yeah, I'm going live to sing my songs again.
Right. The thing that you could really team up and collaborate, right? Like, YouTube is still pushing their hashtag series, which is like blank with me, right? So you could do jam with me and you could collaborate with other artists and even do like, do emo night on your channel and then do, happy summer night, I don't know, on one of the artist channels and then do another, and so you could actually team up with, independent artists that you like that may have a similar audience and combine those audiences to bring new people to you. So that, that is something that is pretty cool that, I think as artists, we're always thinking about, oh, well, I'm going to do a live stream and I'm going to do this, but now that we're in this whole, this thing where everybody's a lot more available than they used to be. So you might be able to coordinate with other artists, either from your region or, from across the world and do something cool that, you can, start getting your audiences to listen to each other. And that's a really, it's almost unselfish, but it's not. It's great marketing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
where it's like,
yeah.
I will, lend my audience to you and you will lend your audience to me. And it's like, oh, now we're all YouTubers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely something that's cool. And people are more and more interested in long distance collaboration. They're used to seeing musicians playing on Zoom-like calls, right? So I know my next fan finder is actually a Zoom style setting with me singing, playing keys, playing bass, and my cellist playing two parts for a song. And that'll be something that I'm running and it'll be looking very much like a Zoom call. So I think that's something creative that you can do with live streaming and also something that's collaborative and can share those audiences across artists.
Yeah, for sure. I'm so glad you mentioned collaboration. That's something else that we've kind of been seeing on the front line here at IndieX. We've had a number of our artists do a live stream series of takeovers where they'll kind of trade off with friends of theirs. And these are not necessarily like certain size artists. We've seen it both with larger artists who have a big established fan base and smaller artists who are just kind of working to grow things, doing trade-off live streams where they take over each other's pages, which is really cool. And actually, while we speak, another one of our artists is actually doing a live stream benefit concert tonight with a number of different artists, and they're going to just be, collaborating together on this sort of thing for a good cause, which I also think is something important to consider, from a creative perspective right now. If there's a cause that's close to your heart as an artist, and this goes back into the idea of, aligning your marketing with things that you care about and things that aren't necessarily directly tied to your music. If there are causes or charities or nonprofits or whatever that you care about, live streams are a really great way to encourage fans to get involved with that as well. So I'm really excited to see how this kicks off. That's going to be going live in a few hours here. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure most people listening to this podcast are familiar with doing Facebook Lives with a tip jar, or obviously you can put a link to a tip jar in a YouTube live stream. We've also seen artists using Stage It, which have their notes proprietary. You do pay a certain amount of commission on that, but there are lots of different platforms that you can use to kind of help you also monetize. I love the tip jar / pay what you want kind of situation. I've actually been doing that with one of my albums recently. Instead of free plus shipping and handling, I've done Pay What You Want, and I've received as much as $50 for an album. Same thing with tips, right? If you're adding a tip jar or adding some kind of monetization to these live streams, especially if people start to enjoy them over time and you start taking more and more risks, they will feel cause to want to, help out your career, and, maybe tip you a lot, so those kinds of like opportunities don't arise unless you do it, so if we haven't yet convinced you to start live streaming, and if the whole world talking about live streaming hasn't convinced you to start live streaming, you got a lot of catching up to do. I'd get started ASAP.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I think like at this point, we're in such a saturated space with live streaming that like if you're going to start doing it, and you should, it's important to keep in mind like the quality of it at this point should be something that you keep in mind, something that you consider. It's not just as simple as, going live with your laptop camera and, an acoustic guitar. Really to stand out at this point is about consistency for one, because there's people who have been doing this, people like Dave, and plenty of other artists who have been doing this for years, so getting that consistency in is, at this point, you're fighting a little bit of an uphill battle. So making sure that your live streams are of quality in terms of how you actually functionally put them together I think it's really important.
And if you have enough people to warrant it, right? Which, I mean, I would, I'd be wary of giving you a benchmark, right? But if you've got enough people that you think would engage, if your live stream is hitting 100 or more people, it could be great to put it in a Facebook group, right? And kind of develop an audience with a more intimate setting there. And maybe you do one live stream per month on your page, but then you do live streams in your Facebook group, because you're allowed to have a very different kind of conversation there. So again, that ends up being a situation where perhaps you can monetize, but it doesn't feel like marketing, right? Like we were talking last week. So I think that that's something else that you can do to kind of incentivize people showing up. I've also done giveaways via live stream, which, can be really fun. Obviously, if you make that publicly available and you're giving away something that is not very relevant to your artistry, you're going to get a lot of junk in there, like people who just want to win the Amazon gift card, right? Which is fine. You might convert them in the end, but largely like doing giveaways of your merch or things that you have in stock that you don't have to like then forward a bunch of money for and stuff like that. But that can be really cool. And putting it either in a private Facebook group or even as an unlisted YouTube, and then putting that on your website, right? This gives you opportunities to target people who have a higher level of intent with you and really kind of max out that live stream potential as far as getting customer data. So there's a few things there to look at as well.
Definitely, yeah. And on that note, there's, taking things the next level. Once you're putting in the work of consistently, moving people through and nurturing people in these live streams, as you're continuing to build it up, if you can work in, live stream offers, even where some of them could potentially be behind a paywall, not the only one behind a paywall. I certainly wouldn't recommend making your live streams totally walled off only to customers. But when you're getting it to a point where you're doing, a few of them publicly and using that as a nurturing piece, being able to offer, a private live stream of some kind to fans, for example, who might be part of like a membership platform, if you've got something built out or if you've got a Patreon in place, that kind of thing can be really, really valuable to those folks to give them, some personal one-on-one time with you. And what that looks like could be, that's just, the limits are only your creativity.
Right. Yeah, and I've actually seen artists as well do kind of the same thing as Gracie with her Beatles night, or these mood themes that we're talking about. I've actually seen them kind of incorporate them as a repeating thing, and I know Dave has done this as well. And basically it's like it's recurring, but it changes every time because the content is different. And so they'll make like a cute little name, right, for it, and then actually create merch around it. And something that I've really enjoyed lately I've been using Ecamm Live for a lot of my, even my Entrepreneur live streams. And what's cool about it is that I can actually have fans Skype in. And so, and it's the same thing kind of as IG, right? If like you have a fan come in, but if it's more private, you can, be like, okay, if you're wearing your, Manic Monday shirt, Skype in and show everybody and let's chat, and that gives them yet another opportunity because you've got this merch available. Maybe you give away the first few, right, to kind of seed the audience, and then people will want to buy it and come live with you because they're wearing the merch as well. So that's another cool thing that you can do with it. Even if it's not a paid stream, it can still help promote other types of monetization and get that fan buy-in a lot higher, which I think everybody's trying to do.
Yeah, totally. I think that that's such a good point. And I honestly think that that's something that a lot of people aren't talking about when it comes to live streaming right now, is how to make offers in ways that are really,
not marketing,
not gross,
not
like
salesy.
Not salesy, not gross. I mean, a lot of the focus I've heard on is, on things like Twitch, for example, like how people can tip you right there, or now the new Facebook stars, and kind of tapping into that, or like super chat on YouTube. But I think there's really tactful ways to make direct offers, and you can tie it into exactly like you said, like what your live stream theme is about. That's a really, really cool way to get creative, especially if it's a matter of shouting people out and actually bringing them on. I think that that's awesome. Something related to that, I've actually seen a couple live streams on Instagram Live from Tom DeLonge, the singer from Angels and Airwaves and formerly from Blink-182. He's just been going live randomly from like music video shoots and just bringing his fans on just as like somebody wants to hang out with me. And he's been doing them, it seems like he's been doing them like once a week or so. And it's really cool, especially for a guy who's been like, in the music scene for a really long time. Getting that closely involved with his fans. So I think if, the takeaway there is like, if you're an artist that's been kind of on the mysterious side of things and maybe not the most engaged with your fans on social media from like a person to person perspective, you've got a big opportunity to like, surprise people with doing that kind of thing. It really surprised me when I saw that. So I thought that was a really interesting a note for anyone who's kind of been hiding behind the veil.
Yeah, I know. It's funny. I'm the opposite. I like chat with people a lot one-to-one, but I have not been like, I don't post a crap ton on my socials. It's just, I use Greenlight Warmth Boosting to extend the life of each post, and that's how I manage my content, right? So you might do something totally different. That's fine. But yeah, I'm more of a hand-to-hand combat type. I deal a lot in Messenger. I've got a lot built out in my ManyChat machine, which, my fans know full well that if they're playing around in CCBot, that it's CCBot and it's not me, but I always engage with them personally beyond that. I do a lot in Instagram Direct. And so what's cool about that is that when you are gathering those contents and you're getting more and more familiar with them, by the time you do go live, right? And you're like, you can actually align with fans ahead of time and be like, hey, do you want to come on as part of my live at this time? And what it really can present is a situation where the fans that have not been as interactive are like, whoa, what boat did I miss here? Right? I think that that's a great way to show people like, look, all you got to do is like talk to me, and you're in, like, we're friends. So if you're not, necessarily at a point where with your lives you are, generating hundreds of views as soon as you go live, that's something that you can do to kind of help those things along, right? Depending on what platform you are, you could, boost that post, right? If it's a post, stories, obviously there's a little bit of a difference there, but in the end, like, stories don't stack social proof the way posts do, right? So there's a lot of different ways that you could basically take that content and repurpose it. to still show people who are maybe kind of lukewarm on you, give them a way to feel warmer about you, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
So that's, I'm always looking for ways because I know that we have a lot of indies who are just starting out on some of these things. And so, just finding those few super loyal fans, I always want to make sure that if you are a relatively newer artist or you've had trouble building up your fans, you probably still have a couple of rabid ones, right? And the more that we can give you ideas for how to seed that audience, right? To make yourself, really have engaging content with fans, even if there aren't a ton that are coming to your live stream from the get-go, you can definitely seed the population in order to get kind of the feeling and the look and the interaction. Because I know a lot of artists struggle with like, oh, I'm live and there's 2 people in here and there's nothing happening. And then they quit going live because they hit that, that psychological barrier. So that's one way that you can kind of overcome that. Find those few rabid fans, coordinate with them, and then get that live. And even if you don't have a ton of people coming in live to watch, there's still lifeblood in that post. You can obviously promote it or talk about it to your mailing list, send people there. And, it really will encourage them to feel like they want to be more involved, and you don't feel as awkward just being by yourself singing to 2 people.
Totally. Yeah. I think that there's so much low hanging fruit in that way for artists who especially are just starting out and might feel like the stage fright, so to speak, of, being on with 2 people or 3 people. And it's like, I don't want to do this if there's nobody watching.
Yeah.
I think there's so much low hanging fruit, whether it's, collaborating with other artists and making that something cool that it just becomes a recurring thing, or collaborating with, directly with your fans. Like you were saying, if you can alternate between those 2 things, you might end up with a best of both worlds kind of situation where, there's 2 kinds of really interesting segments that you've got going on that's just alternating throughout your life.
Right. Well, and I think too, it's a great moment for you to find inspiration for how to interact with a non-present audience. Like if you watch John Oliver, his show, he's just sitting in a room and he mentions the white void almost every episode. And he's making these jokes. He's got obviously no laugh track. There's no audience, right? Jimmy Fallon, he has no audience, although he does have some more interactive stuff like Zoom calls, and he's doing stuff with the Roots from, remote locations. But there's obviously a lot of people out there right now who are used to having huge audiences and currently have no one with them live. And so some of them are very talented in, just pushing through the silence, but some of them are also coming up with different solutions to still feel that engagement, right? So you can totally go look at those people and be like, all right, how do they deal with not having a face-to-face interaction or not having a laugh track, or not having someone to bounce off of? What do they do? How do they get through those moments that would, normally be awkward? And, you can look at, these guys are obviously pros, so you can kind of look at what they're doing and see if any of that rings true with the way you would present yourself.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Looking outside of the music space, I think is particularly insightful, because really, like, everyone's live streaming right now.
Yeah.
It's not just artists, it's comedians.
Right.
My local weatherman is doing the weather on the 11 o'clock news from his bedroom.
Yeah, my mayor is doing like stuff from, he's going live on YouTube and talking about whatever's happening latest in the, and I think that too, it's just, it's a good, that's where it's really important to have something else to say, because people are really in a place where they're consuming a lot of content, but it needs to be original or they're gonna, find it in 50,000 other places, So just think about the type of media that's available to people right now and think like, okay, I need to up the ante. Here's some inspo, right?
Yeah, for sure. There's just so much out there for inspiration. I mean, I've even seen local businesses, brick and mortar places that are killing it with live streams. I think about some bars. I've actually seen some of our indies in Indie Pro who have partnered with local breweries or bars that they work at, and they let them do a takeover of their page.
Nice.
Like, Meaning the bar is letting the artist take over their page and do a live stream right from there and run a digital tip jar, that kind of thing. You can get really creative. So, even if you've got, your regular spots that you might gig at, look for partnership there.
That's such a cool idea.
Yeah, everybody's really, everybody is looking for ways to get creative. So it's not just artists that are trying to do it right now. Businesses are too. I've seen local businesses who are, doing things where they interview other local business owners about how they're getting through this pandemic, and just kind of, again, collaborating and getting creative with one another and, giving each other some space and exposing themselves to different audiences. So there's all that to say is there's so many places to take creative cues from that, if you're not paying attention to it, you should.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's always good if you're feeling stuck to know where to look. Right. So I would venture to say that musicians, especially bigger ones, right, are really accustomed to feeding off the audience energy. And something that I actually used to say a lot, because before I was in the Army gig as a sponsored artist, I was just an Army bands person. I came into the Army as a bass guitarist. That was my occupational specialty as far as the Army was concerned. So I backed up, a lot of other singers and played in, jazz trios and played in salsa bands. And I played in all these, Army bands. And something that I would always kind of lecture my bands about, I mean, we would end up like playing sometimes to very few people, right? Because the Army bands have been kind of, and obviously this was kind of internal drama for the U.S. Army, but bands were getting their funding cut and people were saying, what's the point of this? And bands were like, it's morale and whatever. So, there were points where the bands were just kind of booking themselves into venues, even though there wasn't going to be a huge audience that they knew of, or even playing like outside the library, right? Just so that they would continue to be occupied and continue to be doing like community morale. So, one thing that would happen when there was no one there is that the band would start to shut down and they would just have very low energy and they would have a really hard time feeling amped about the gig because there was no one there. And I would argue that musicians are widely that way, right? They really feed off that energy. And so something I would always lecture is like, look, the energy, yes, it is collaborative, right? But you also have to be projecting enough energy. If you're a great performer, you're projecting enough energy to like ramp up anybody, even the most like stone cold faced crowd. You're projecting enough energy to fill the room, and that can be exhausting, but that's good performance, right? So I think that that's something that we all have an opportunity to practice now. And if you are live streaming and you're playing seemingly to an empty room and you don't have that energy to work off of, you're going to be a great touring gigging artist because you're going to learn to fill the space with the energy. So yeah, I definitely recommend, taking a look at non-musicians, because a lot of them, especially comedians, guys who are doing, night shows or, just a lot of these guys, they're used to having, especially in TV shows, right? If they're comedians that have done TV or actors that have done movies, they don't get the whole shebang that we see, the laugh track and the, all the special effects and all the whatever. They have to perform without it. So the more that you can find people like that doing their craft without the things that make it easy, the better that you'll probably be able to figure out how to do this yourself.
Totally. And I think you made such a good point. Like there are some like big career building skills to be learned during this time that you can take with you after this, So I think now is such a great time to be capitalizing on that, and making the most of a time where, it's difficult.
Yeah. I think too, based on some of the feedback that we've gotten from our YouTube music reps, right? The folks at YouTube who are kind of overseeing the music wing, so to speak. They say that artists are fans are a little bit more, they're a lot more critical of audio than they are of video. So even if you are using your phone camera or your laptop camera, as long as you have good audio, they're pretty much going to be okay with it, right? It's when the audio is, you don't have, a fast enough connection, so it's buffering, or if your audio sounds like crap and they can't really hear you. So if you are in a position where you're like, I don't know what to prioritize as far as gear for your live stream, and you don't have a budget to just like build out a studio for yourself, YouTube Music recommends that you prioritize the audio over everything. So whether that's setting up a mic for your guitar or making sure that you have an audio input for your keys and your vocal or whatever it is, that's definitely the recommendation that we're getting from people who see the data.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like, just to speak to personal experience, like, I'm way more likely to scroll away or click out from altogether a live stream that just doesn't sound good, as opposed to one that doesn't look good. Because, even if I'm just listening to it as background music or just kind of paying attention to it while I'm doing other things, multitasking, if the audio's bad, I'm gonna jump.
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave pretty quick. If the video is not so great, like, I can continue doing what I'm doing as long as I can hear you and hear the songs that I dig.
Yeah, definitely. And also, obviously we we like to ask questions of the audience. And one thing that it took me a while to learn, and I've still seen a lot of indies struggling with, is when they have planned a talking point, right? Some kind of conversation point into their live stream, and then they sit there and wait. So if you are, trying to do that, which obviously, there's music, there's covers, but there's also like chatter, right? There's just talking about your life. Think about those narratives, those storylines we were talking about the week prior. This is a great opportunity to kind of talk about the things that are relevant to you and see how much of it is relevant to your fans. So if you, say like, hey, I'm going to play this when I come back, like I want to see this, right? I want to hear this from you. I want to know what you're watching. Like I've exhausted the Netflix I know to find. So like refer me to something, and then talk about TV shows, because people are streaming like a mug right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, they're going to have something to say, and maybe someone will actually refer you to something if you have time to watch, there you go. But that's a perfect opportunity to like tell people, okay, I'm going to play this song. I'm hoping when I come back, you guys will have this to talk about. And that way, if you have, sometimes an older audience, they're less chatty, right? In fact, when I go on Corrin's Corner on Saturdays, Facebook is almost always like dead quiet. Like I'll get 6 comments the whole stream, even though there's 25 people. And on YouTube, everybody's like, blah, 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 blah. So kind of prepare yourself for that. You might have an audience that is less talkative. So give them something to talk about. And that's what I end up doing as well, is I'll be like, hey guys, I'm testing this thing. Have you ever used this? Tell me what you think. And then I'll talk about the thing that I was going to talk about, and then come back to the comments, and now we have a conversation. And that's a great way to kind of fill that silence as well.
Yeah, 100%. It's almost like programming a show, taking the role of a music director here and thinking about logically where things fit, how you break up silence with other pieces of content, whether it be songs or other talking points. I think that's absolutely critical. That can take a live stream from feeling, both to you and to the audience, it can take it from feeling really awkward to being something that's like, wow, that was like so engaging and exciting and seamless. So I think that's absolutely critical.
Yeah, definitely. So hopefully you've gleaned something about live streaming that you didn't already brainstorm yourself and that you haven't heard in 50,000 other places. That's all I got. Jack, you have anything else?
I think that's all I've got as well. I hope that you guys take some of this info and, take it and use it. Make something cool. Take your live streams to the next level, and, take advantage of this time to better your skills a little bit.
Yeah. Keep digging into that topic wheel / narrative / storyline / the thing that we're calling that. keep on digging into that and, try to identify things that mean a lot to you, but especially that mean a lot to your fans, and perpetuate the conversation with that. And I see, I think we're kind of proving that that's a full spectrum thing, right? Whether it's in your merch, your live streams, in your content, in your emails, in your opt-ins, in your, all of those pieces, right? So definitely keep digging into that. But especially for live streaming, I think that it's really going to help you, fill a lot more time than you might be able to just playing your catalog.
Totally.
Awesome. And that's all for this episode, Indies. Next week, we're going to talk a little bit about, and this is actually kind of funny because we're talking about the digital realm and how no one's touring. And so that's why you have to be live streaming. But as we're looking at the touring industry, we're seeing a lot of interesting trends and a lot of interesting narratives. So next week, we're going to do a little bit of, maybe a little bit of debating. Hopefully, Jack is down for that. But a little bit of talking about what the industry is saying, what venues locally are saying. I'll be bringing some insights from local venues and, different people who have given me some insight from the touring market to see, all right, how are they predicting the future? What is the crystal ball? And hopefully we can pick apart some of the crystal ball and just kind of have a conversation about it because I think that a lot of our touring and gigging musicians are like, when? So we'll talk about what we think are, what our perspectives are on the whole thing and, see if we can get that crystal ball rolling.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to take a little bit of a look into the future of live shows.
Yeah, definitely. Well, everyone else is trying to predict the future right now, right? We might as well too.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we will see you in our crystal ball next week on Creative Juice.
Thanks, Indies.
East Coast, West Coast, say what?